Increased political polarization is a significant risk to all of our expressions of community.
And it is the duty of communities of faith to provide the antidote to that polarization.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers, and thank you for joining us for today's important topic. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am the president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, and I serve as today's moderator. I would like you to meet our panelists for the day.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. I serve as the senior minister of First Christian Church, Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, I'm Dan Levin. I'm blessed to serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hello, my name is Mel Robeck. I'm senior professor of church history and ecumenics and special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Thank you so much to all our panelists for being here today. And now for today's topic. A 2020 YouGov Economist poll found that 86% of Americans think it has become harder to date someone who supports the opposite political party. The situation since then seems not to have improved. Jason Armistead, reporting in BBC News, references this report and then his own interviews with a range of Americans who talk of their disastrous dates with those across the political divide. Now, dating apps are created for only those with defined political views. Further, some researchers argue that this polarizing trend will multiply as couples with shared political perspectives then bring up children who will think similarly. In the faith environment, marrying individuals who have similar faith traditions has been common. But some would argue that political persuasion is becoming more decisive in the way Americans relate to society and each other than shared moral and biblical understanding. In this context, the panelists are asked to answer at least the following. Do you agree that society is becoming more polarized? If so, do you see the increasing polarization in the US having a similarly polarizing effect in and amongst faith traditions? And do you think there is a significant risk of political adherence making religious commitments irrelevant? So we're going to go back now and start with those who began our conversation. Tom.
Thank you. I'm not sure if our conversation today is going to be about romance or about political polarization. Maybe I'll begin by talking about both. I suppose that one could hope for a Romeo and Juliet situation where star-crossed lovers are brought together across the difficulties between the Capulets and the Montagues, or one might hope for some Hatfield girl falling in love with some boy named McCoy. Actually, I guess through history, most times when that sort of thing happened, where people were, men and women or couples were brought together with greatly differing belief systems, it usually was simply resolved in the woman not getting to express her opinion, at least publicly. And maybe we ought to talk about women's rights then, and their effect on this particular phenomenon that we're talking about. But I think in a larger sense, I want us to talk about the way, although there have always been us's and them's, today we seem less and less able, and particularly less and less willing, to get along with those with whom we disagree. And to boot, there's always some information source that's ready and willing to confirm our opinion. I was astounded the other day to be listening to a program and heard a woman being interviewed, and she was sure as could be that the war in Ukraine was all a hoax. It was not really happening. People were not, all those children and men and women were not really being killed or driven into refugee status or whatever. It was all just a big hoax. And she really believed that. And the reporter then asked her where she got most of her news, and she explained where she got most of her news, and he sort of shook his head and said, "Okay, I see where that's coming from." If we cannot move beyond the intractability of the various the sides into which we have placed ourselves, the groupings, then hopes for our democracy, for the future of our world, look bleak in the short term. And I think that goes far beyond dating apps to things of much greater import. So let me just begin the conversation that way.
Thank you.
So I think it is certainly normal for people to seek out partners, friendships with people who have shared moral commitments, shared values, shared principles. But I think we're finding ourselves in a world where we have grown ever more tribal and chauvinistic about our tribes. And in fact, our commitment to tribe is sometimes a deeper commitment than we even have to our religious faith, where you might hear somebody say, well, I don't mind if she or he is in a relationship with someone of a different faith, but they better not be in a different party. And that is worrisome to me. In Jewish tradition, in the times of the Talmud 2,000 years ago, there were two great leaders, Hillel and Shammai. And they didn't agree on much at all. And in fact, there was even a violent conflict between them for a period of time. And there is a passage in the Talmud, in the rabbis' writings, where they say that for 3 years, Hillel and Shammai struggled with each other. And then a voice from the heavens, in Hebrew they call it a bat kol, a heavenly voice, calls out these words, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These words and those words are the words of the living God. Which means that there's truth to be held by both sides, even though they disagree. But then the law continues and it says, but the law goes according to Hillel. Well, why did they do that? Was it because he was smarter? Was it because he had better intuition about what God wanted? They say no, it was because he was more gracious. It was because he taught his teachings along with Shammai's teachings. And in fact, he taught Shammai's teachings before his teachings. Hillel got picked not because he was smarter, but because he was nicer. And because he realized that national unity was far more important than the particular truths they held. But the other thing that I'm struck with that passage in the Talmud is they say that even in the midst of this incredible rift between these two schools, they still said their kids can marry each other. And to me, there was this understanding that, yes, we disagree and there are principles involved and it matters and we're still family. And I think what we've lost in our national discourse is the sense of there are principles involved and there are values and we disagree vehemently, but we've lost the sense that we're still all family.
Yeah.
There is a sense among people who live in blue states that the people who live in red states are not family. And vice versa. How often have you ever heard somebody say, wouldn't it be great if Texas or California would just secede, right? Red people want people in California to go be their own country. Blue people want Texas to go be their own country. And what we need to realize is these are the United States of America. And we need to figure out how we can embrace each other as family, even while we still work out the very important differences about how we see the world and what we think is the right way to go forward, God willing, together united as a nation.
Thank you.
Well, it's hard to think about dating anybody because I haven't dated for over 54 years. So,
Attaboy.
so I don't remember much about it except that it was very uncomfortable and, you know, it took time, and I don't think I dated more than 3 people in my life, and I married the third one, and she was the charm. And you're right. I mean, I think we do tend to pick people that are somewhat like us in terms of values and religion and so forth. Actually, I think 2 out of the 3 were much closer to that. But the reality is we have allowed through the years this separation, this division, this picking of one party over the other. Some days I think that parties no longer are useful. I mean, there's a sense in which everybody should be an independent. Then I'm not being forced to take this or that plank to do any particular thing. I mean, I am, and I will say this carefully, I'm a Republican in a democratic state, okay? Means I never get my way. I mean, extremely rare, even at the local level, that I would ever get my way on anything. But I'm there as a voice, and I think it's important to be that voice. But that doesn't mean I write off the rest of the state and say, well, I think we should secede from the rest of the union and become a country of our own. I would not like that at all. I think I'd move to somewhere else. It wouldn't be Texas, but it wouldn't be California either. But the reality is, I think we have lost our ability to recognize what we thought were our motto, E pluribus unum. Out of many we have created a one people. We have forgotten what it means to be family. We have forgotten what it means to be Americans, North Americans, United States Americans. We have forgotten the unity side of things. And I think this becomes especially close to me because I'm constantly working on unity in the church. I mean, it's the same issue, really. Why do we have to continue to argue and fight against one another when in fact we could do so much more if we were together? You know, we may not always agree. Certainly in California, I can't agree with everything. In fact, there are some things I really strongly disagree with, but I don't have much of a choice in accepting that. Either I'm a part of California or I am not. I'm part of the United States or I'm not. And I do worry a little bit about if people are only going to dating apps and they're only staying with people that look exactly like them, we are in bitter trouble.
Yeah, thank you. And that's the thing that bothered me is this sense of I'm not even going to consider someone who has a different position, different view than me. At the end of the day, yes, by all means, we're likely to move closer to people that have similar values and share similar ideals and so on. But that sense of almost dismissing half of the population from our radar, even because they have different views, seems to me problematic. I'd like to go back to Tom's Romeo and Juliet, because you actually started saying, if only we were like. Well, actually, look at the disaster that happened. It was a tragedy, right? So, but what caused that tragedy? What caused the tragedy was because you have 2 people who are willing to look beyond the divisions. And you have all those around them and the society around saying, no, you can't. And that to me is the real tragedy behind. I mean, the tragedy obviously is their deaths in the story, but behind that, in the dynamics, it's the fact that you have people willing to have bridges, build bridges, create unity, create others, but you have the wider society saying, no, we're not going to let you.
And I'm reminded something that Mel mentioned a few weeks ago when he talked about how at the World Council of Churches there was a movement to expel the Russian Orthodox Church, and that the leader of that institution said, no, the dialogue is where it is. We still have to be one family of churches. And I think that's where faith traditions really have a role to play in trying to heal those divides. You know, I was just part of a big conversation in my congregation about whether we should take a more active role in advocacy around issues that are important to us and that extend from Torah and tradition. And there was a whole series of conversations about what would happen if we did something that would offend some people in the congregation. There were other people that said, well, you know what, they can find another congregation. And I said, no, we need to figure out a way where we can advocate and educate about what we believe and not leave people behind and not make people feel like they've lost their congregation, their community, or their faith community just because there are some people there that have a difference of opinion. We ran a program a number of years ago called a Civil Discourse Initiative, where we would take a complicated issue like immigration, which we spoke about a number of weeks ago, and we studied what Jewish sources had to say about immigration. And then we broke into another room, and there were groups of 4. And if you had a feeling that America should be more restrictive in its immigration policies, you were invited to sit on a chair that had a yellow card. And if you thought America's policy should be more open, you should sit in an orange seat. And there were 2 yellows and 2 oranges in each of the foursomes. And we gave people the opportunity to dialogue with each other. Well, why do you believe what you believe? And why do you think what you think? And to try to approach each other with openness and curiosity and a place where you could say, here's what I really think, and this is why it's important to me. And through that, people from the right and the left and the middle and everywhere in between were able to have a really meaningful conversation about something complicated. This is the role that I think faith communities can play in helping to heal these terrible fissures and divides.
Do you think that's also part of in a faith community getting to the point where we are willing to see someone else in our community stand up for convictions that they have, even if we don't have the same conviction, and for that not to be taken personally against us? Because I think sometimes it's like, here we are in our community, and if our community says this and we don't agree, it's a personal attack on us. Yeah. And why is it a personal attack on us? Surely we should be able to be bigger than that.
Yeah, we Christians have a far worse record than your community. I think, Dan, with folks just being willing, and in this country free, to just go off and start their own church if they maintain their spiritual side at all, or just drop away. And we do not do a good job and have not done a good job for centuries. But it's accentuated now, it seems to me like, with the expansion of social media and the willingness of so many to spread falsehoods, to misrepresent things, and to pass along things that simply are not true.
And I think we lack courage. I think when we go to synagogue or we go to church and we want the pastor or the rabbi to tell us that what we already think is right. And if the leader challenges us to say, well, maybe you're not entirely right, maybe there's another way to think about it, then that pastor gets excoriated or that rabbi gets yelled at for being too political. I was at a meeting the other day that they said, when they agree with you, it's social action, and when they disagree with you, you're being too political. Yep. And I think that if we could be a little more courageous and say, oh, you know what? My pastor, my rabbi, my friends don't agree with me. I wonder why. And can I listen with enough respect and humility where I don't have to sacrifice what I believe, but maybe I can listen with an open heart to try to understand why they believe what they believe so that I can have a thoughtful conversation and explain why I'm different.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's take a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Thank you for joining us again, viewers, and we are now moving towards our closing remarks. Tom.
Thank you. Jesus said, it's no big deal for you to love those who love you. He said, even the tax collectors do that. He said, real virtue comes when we learn to love those that despise us. That is why later, early Christian leader Paul was able to write that in Christ there is no longer slave or free, Jew, Greek, male, female, not because those distinctions went away, but because we no longer recognize those things as things that kept us apart. Our responsibility to each other always is to act toward each other with grace, which means that we act toward each other in goodness without expecting, without it simply being reciprocity for some goodness done to us.
You know, the story of Jesus from a Christian perspective is the greatest story ever told, and it is a love story. It's one of these things where God sent God's Son to die for us so that we might have life eternal with God. That's an incredible story. So about the time of the Super Bowl this year, there are a number of ads that are going on described as He gets you. Jesus gets you. And I don't know whether you saw those or have ever seen them, but Jesus was alone, and if you're alone, He gets you. Jesus was a migrant. If you're a migrant, He gets you. Jesus was bullied. If you've been bullied, He gets you. You get the point. But the analysis of that is not some good news statement. Everything, if you look on Google or if you look on anything online, everything that pops up is, this is a right-wing, fundamentalist agenda that's trying to get you to vote Republican. Don't listen to it. And I want to say, what has Jesus got to do with this? What has Jesus got to do with this? How are our churches talking about Jesus in such a way that it becomes a right-wing fundamentalist issue? Or, if you disagree with what's going on there on these ads, that it's a left-wing issue to clamp down on it. I just really am finding that very frustrating. But it's exactly what we're talking about in terms of the antagonism toward one another, even about a simple thing like a love story of God for humanity.
I was listening to an interview with an Israeli scholar named Dr. Micha Goodman, who was talking about the polarization that's in Israel too. Yes. And what he talked about was, if you look at how Israelis poll about policies, there's a very, very broad consensus among a vast majority of Jewish Israelis about how the government and certain policies should be enacted. But because your identity has become so wrapped up in your party, you define yourself in one way that's not necessarily even in keeping with your policy values, because your political identity is held so close. And I think what will help us is if we can try to find a way to expand our concept of identity beyond I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and even beyond sometimes our religious identities, to help us appreciate a broader sense of collaborative necessity that we share with each other than our narrow confines of those that are kind of part of our tribe. You know, I'm reminded that when the Israelites gathered at the foot of Mount Sinai, where God met them all together at once, what happened there? What happened was this extraordinarily divided, mixed multitude of former slaves came together to be one with each other. And in that moment of grand national meeting and unity, it was then and only then that the Holy One spoke to them all together at once. And perhaps if we can find a way to find our own new Sinai where we can all come together to be one with each other, it's amazing the truths that we might hear from that moment of encounter.
Thank you. You know, as I've been listening to this conversation, I was reminded of many years ago now, I was invited on a retreat that was dealing really with intercultural communication. And we were split into tribes, for lack of a better word, and taught our culture. And then we had to interact with the other, but just work from the perspective of our culture, and then see what kind of, you know, interactions happened. It was, the culture I was in was non-tactile and very bargaining, and the other one was extremely tactile and engaging, and you could sense the friction that developed because of that. And you know, I wonder sometimes whether the kind of thinking we do when we try to understand cultures actually is really what we need now, even when we don't understand politics. You know, that capacity to actually stand back and hear stories and listen and engage and understand perspective that sometimes bring bridges. I think we seem to be lacking that. And so we polarize, we don't listen, we don't care, we don't have that meeting place at foot of Mount Sinai. We just don't have it any longer. Okay. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. So now, friends, until next week, at the very same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.